There were a few optical developments that I watched very closely, which are very significant, but also part of why Nigeria is what it is, such an incredibly great country. The relationship between President Obasanjo and his vice president is, for me, like the relationship, like a Catholic marriage. It may have troubles, but it doesn't break up. I think there also is evidence of what Nigeria's greatness is all about. And when I saw Peter Obi having a robust chat with Waziri, Atiku, I wasn't sure whether they were discussing a measure or whether it was just a casual conversation. But look, some of the things I would like to say, I don't have much time, but there's what I call the delusions about democracy. And I think there are a lot of people who are here. Many of you have understood the theory of democracy. And my friend and brother, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who has done both the practical and the theoretical and so on. And I'm happy that President Obasanjo made reference to Athens. Because many of us, when we talk about democracy in Athens, we have certain illusions about what this democracy was all about. And indeed, if you pose the question, is democracy failing in Africa? The question to ask is democracy passing anywhere? Is there any part of the world that democracy is successful in? You know, Leo Tolstoy once said that all happy families are happy in the same way, but all unhappy families are unhappy differently. So while democracy may be working, we pretend that it's not working, and President Obasanjo made the point, but it is successful, it is working for many people, because we can see from the changes in their lifestyle, the measurable changes in their accounts, the measurable changes in the opportunities available to them. So for those people, democracy is working. For those who may have failed and are still waiting, democracy may still work. But even in Athens, not everybody was at the square. Children were not in the square, women were not in the square, poor people were not in the square. And of course, the notion of representative democracy is because all of us cannot be in the same. But even if all of us are in the same room, I tell people, even if you go to Harvard, then they fail exam for Harvard. You go to Cambridge, some people, they fail. So we can, even if we are in one room, not only are our views different, our capacities and our competencies are different. Now, if you look at what happened in the United States of America, from where we draw a bit of inspiration from the point of view of our own democracy, is that American democracy and what is now European democracy drew from the thinking of such prominent philosophers like Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Thomas Hobbes grew up in England at a time in which there was war. And he was a man who grew up in mortal fear because he fled, went to France when things changed. And indeed, Thomas Hobbes says that his twin brother was fear. And as a result, he conceived of a notion of a state, because the whole question was what he called the state of nature. That is, state of nature is a state in which there is no sovereign and no government. And the idea is, what will a perfect government look like? And because of the history, the culture, where he grew up and how he grew up, he lived in mortal fear. And he therefore argued that for democracy to thrive, or for any system of government to be just, fair, and equitable, it had to be of such a nature that it had what you call a leviathan, that is a sovereign, that will have literally all the power, will aggregate all the powers. We call them dictators now. But his idea was that if we gave one person so much power, in exchange for that, he would look after all of us. And so he believed that left on our own devices, we as humans will get bestial. That's why he came up with those three words, that in a state of nature, life will be nasty, it will be brutish, and it will be short. Now, John Locke, who was a far more influential philosopher, political philosopher, was a medical doctor in Oxford. Again, he had his own problems. He fled to the Netherlands, but he finally came back. And because of the circumstances that he grew up in, lack of freedom, he was persecuted in Oxford and other places, but he grew up cherishing certain ideals, some of which underpin the philosophy of what led to the foundation of the United States of America. Because that is why when you read John Locke, he talks about key issues: liberty, freedom, religious freedom. limited government. And his argument was that, unlike Thomas Hobbes, we shouldn't transfer power to a sovereign and hope that he will look after us all. Well, no. John Locke believed that each and every one of us, created in the image and likeness of God, requires just a space to be able to exercise their freedom. And so he agitated for what he called limited government. And he focused on natural rights, the rights that are given to us and they inherit on us as human beings. The quality and quantity of rights that in 1948 became the United Nations Human Rights Declaration. He focused on private property. Every individual had a right to own their own property. Feudalism does not believe that ordinary people can own their own property. So what he had as a social contract argued that citizens are actually free to rebel. And he argued for separation between church and state. And his argument was that if at the end the sovereign is unable to do what he has promised or is elected to do, then he deserves to go. Now, when the Americans founded what is now the United States of America, all of you remember the 1776 Declaration. And I read part of it. Because remember that those who founded America were Christians who fled from Europe. And at that time, the Catholic Church had a lot of power. And that is why up till today, the United States of America remains quite suspicious and has literally tried to close the door to the entrance of Catholics into the presidency of the United States. So after John Kennedy, it took how many years? Then Joe Biden. All of this grew out of the fact that the founding fathers of America focused on the fact that the inspirations that they derived from John Locke. So in the 1776 Declaration, it says, and I read it out to you. It says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, that is, the bonds that connected them to the United Kingdom, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal section of the laws of nature, they are entitled to a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, that it requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Which is that by whichever way you spell it, in whichever language, the central basis and tool for legitimating democracy, why we have chosen democracy, is like Churchill said. Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for others. Because others have been tested, they have been tried, but they've been found wanting, because only democracy entitles citizens to be able to pursue happiness. How they define that happiness, how they aggregate that happiness is purely up to them. And then to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, when a government becomes destructive to the principles that have been initiated, it is the right of the people to alter and to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing powers in such form as to them shall most likely be the effect of safety and happiness. But then he says, prudence and indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for the light and transient causes. Now, when the American Constitution was written in 1787, it was ratified in 1788, and then finally came into operation in 1789. But guess what? Even with that document, with all the aspirations, the point still remained that the same Constitution did not include black people. In fact, the American Constitution was written for white propertied men. Okay? Even if you were white and you were poor, you were not included in that Constitution. If you were a woman, you are not included in that Constitution. If you were a slave, you are not included in that Constitution. But here it is, because there's a lot of debate in Nigeria about this Constitution is imperfect, we want a new Constitution. The point of the fact is that no Constitution can be better than either the Holy Quran or the Holy Bible. Yet we are still living in sin. So it's not so much the content of the document. There is nothing like a perfect document, a perfect Constitution. Even a constitution in its malfunction form can still be a tool. It's a question of what is in the heart and what do you think about other people. But then, the Americans were quick to rectify their constitution. And within a 5-year period, now in 1865, they decided to amend the constitution, the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. So America realized we couldn't continue like Abraham Lincoln would say, have this and have that. Then, after slavery was abolished, black people were still not part of the system. So then in 1868, there was the 14th Amendment. That 14th Amendment conferred rights on citizens across board. And you know, the problem with Nigeria is that we've refused to resolve the issue of citizenship. When I was chairman of the Governing Council of Nasarawa State University, I told them I'm a bishop, but there will be no opening prayer. There will be no opening prayer. So for me, this whole thing about Christian prayer and Muslim prayer, so it just confuses people. But this is why Nigerians continue to dig and dig and dig, and they say if you are digging and you realize it's too deep, stop digging. It's not about stopping religion, but it's about the weaponization and instrumentalization of religion, because we are just reinforcing our identity. Why will it be, for me, why will it be the case that somehow somebody, a Muslim, prays for me? God doesn't have Muslims and doesn't have Christians. He just has children. So those of you who go around telling God to catch your enemy, I say you are wasting your time, because the person you are calling your enemy, he stole from you. He didn't steal from God. So if you go to report him, God will say, this is my son and this is my daughter. So face your problem. But common citizenship then became important. It was not enough to end slavery. What are our rights as citizens? And then at the end, the 15th Amendment in 1870 now conferred on black people and everybody the right to vote. But here's the interesting thing. Women, it's not only now that your problem started. Because even at that time, black people were allowed to vote. Black men were allowed to vote. It was not until 1920 that white women were able to vote. The point I'm making is that democracy is a work in progress. And with all these imperfections, it must be admitted that the essence, that is why democracy must have an eraser. You make a mistake, you correct it. You make a mistake, you correct it. The challenge for us in Nigeria is that every time, and I think it was my friend Donald Duke who made the point. He said that, you know, the problem in Nigeria is everybody who comes as governor wants to go back to the bottom of the hill to start something completely different. If we do not have a mechanism by which we are measuring our growth, then our chest for a democratic society becomes an empty chest. So the question is, there is an American political scientist who published an article, you can find it online. His name is Kukah Bradatan. And the title of his article is, Democracy is for the Gods. Democracy is for the gods. And his argument is that the principles enunciated in democracy are not achievable by mere human, because in reality, when you say, we talk about justice, Justice Okuta used to say, when you talk of justice, has anybody ever seen justice walking on the streets? Because everybody wants justice. The criminal wants justice, the victim wants justice. And Justice Okuta used to say to me, he said, look, in Nigeria, you know, for justice to really be effective, there are three, it has to be, justice is a three-way street. Justice for the perpetrator, justice for the victim, and justice for the larger society. So one day I was talking to him, I said, Papa, there should be another fourth leg of justice. It's possible to have justice for the perpetrator, justice for the victim, justice for the society, but there has to be justice before God. But Bradatan makes the point that we are mere mortals, and that a perfect democracy first doesn't exist, because for it to exist, it has to be by a perfect God. And that the notion of equality is an oxymoron, because there's nothing like, there's no ruler for measuring equality. If you go to the National Assembly, the senators are all senators, but they say they are ranking senators. Ranking senators. No matter your competence, it has to be, you have to fall behind those who have come before you. So this is the kind of society we are living in. Why is it that we kneel down to greet some people and we stand to greet other people? Why is it that we're saying rank and daddy to other people and then we are not? This is the reality we are in. However, the point to make is that democracy and its principles are an endless contestation, both of ideas, of opportunities, and privilege. Because those who are privileged want to hold on to their privileges, and those who are the victims want to insist that life can be better. But in the final analysis, Matthew chapter 23 verse 9, Jesus said something that I find incredible. He said, call no one on earth father, because you have only one father. So this is why we're calling ourselves Muslims or Christians or non-believers or whatever. God said, call no, you have got only one father. The only problem with us in Nigeria is that if you are discriminated against me because I'm a Muslim or that I'm a Christian or whatever, we are children of one God. And if we are not treating one another right, one of us must be a bastard. So it is to make the point, the philosopher Abraham Maslow came up with a theory which is a common theory. You can Google it. It's called the hierarchy of needs. And that all of us want the same thing. Simply because you are president, you still want to breathe. President, every elected official wants to be liked. We crave affection. We want self-esteem. We want a sense of belonging and a sense of safety. And there are what you call physiological needs. That is needs that come to us because we are human, such as the quality of air we breathe. Even though in Africa, even though we are in a democracy, there are certain people who behave as if God gave them the permission, they will decide who will breathe and who will not breathe. Unfortunately, there are certain things that God has given us for free, which those of you who have power cannot control. Whether you are PDP or APC, I think it was somebody who said that it doesn't matter. All these tall people, no matter how tall you are, whether you are tall or short, you can still see the sun, and nobody sees it better than the other. So the challenge for democracy is not so much its claims. It is the extent to which, due to the consciousness of people, that's why there are correlations between the quality of democracy. Okay, Amartya Sen published a beautiful little book. He titles it The Argumentative Indian. And his argument in the book was to say that, look, why don't come and tell us, and President Obasanjo made the point, Western liberal democracy, the question is not the name you give it. A rose by any other name is a rose. But in his argument, he says that, don't come and tell us that you are teaching us how to reason. Because we Indians have always been argumentative. And democracy is about debate. And the debate is based on the way people perceive things. So people talk about a point of view. But a point of view is actually a point from a view. Okay? Depending on where you are sitting, some of you who are sitting slanted, there's a way you are looking at me differently from the people who are right in front of me. So the challenge therefore is, we as Africans inherited a system we were not in the room. Okay? But it's still not enough to say that because democracy is a Western construct, therefore it is inimical to our culture. You know, I always say to my people, especially at marriages, you know, when you hear a Nigerian who is married in the Catholic Church, when he wants to start behaving badly, you start saying, according to African culture. That is, he wants to marry a second wife. Catholic Church say, no, you cannot marry a second wife. And then people start saying the wife is pregnant. They say, you know, man not be wood. Now, it is that, yes, we inherited this from Europe, but why are we defining, how many of you sitting here define going for a holiday to mean going to Togo? Imagine if you call your wife now and say, my dear, we are going on holidays, so but I want us to go and see Cameroon. Okay? Or you say to your wife and children, this year we are going to go on holidays either to Yola or to Sokoto or to whatever. It's not interesting. So we cannot with one side of our mouth say that because democracy is a Western construct, therefore it isn't of relevance to us. Because the reality of our life is defined by Western constructs and Western mindsets. And in any case, the world has come to a point in which it's no longer a question of where you stand. All the walls of division have collapsed. Therefore, the challenge is, what do we do with our heritage? In 1914, when the First World War took place, luckily in 2014, I was invited to deliver a lecture in a place in Sarajevo. And Sarajevo, as you know, is where Archduke Ferdinand was killed. It was the 100th anniversary of the killing of Archduke Ferdinand, which was said to have sparked up the First World War. I went and saw the place. And you could do the measurement and do the arithmetic and ask yourself, how did it happen? Different story. But after the First World War, because the war was fought so as to end all wars, it didn't end all wars. Because shortly after, there was a Second World War. But guess what? After the First World War, people said, no, we can't, this is not us as humans. So they created the League of Nations. And the League of Nations was supposed to help nations come to terms with the fact that, look, we need to rethink. Because how could we have descended to this stage in which we're behaving like animals and killing one another? As a postgraduate student, the first essay we were asked to write at the University of Bradford, the title of the essay was, "Is war a biological necessity or is it a human invention?" Is war a biological, and it is based on an essay written by the anthropologist Margaret Mead. Is war a biological necessity or is it a human need? So the human tendency, which again, if you are a Christian and you read the Bible, James chapter 4 talks about what is the basis. Why do we all fight? Our fighting is driven by greed. Yet, as we said, the Second World War was fought, and then arising from that was the United Nations. The point I'm making is that it's not enough that we are quarreling. It is not necessarily a bad thing that we are quarreling. Democracy is quarrelsome. Marriage is quarrelsome. There's no part of our life that is not full of. The challenge is not so much that we are going to live in a society in which nobody is having any problem. No, it is how do we manage the problems. And for us in Africa, after independence, we saw what we went through. Mandela calls his biography a long walk to freedom, but for me it's a long trek to freedom. Because after independence, our first nationalists, it's very interesting that if you look at the history of Africa, the experiment with democracy, Jomo Kenyatta, Mobutu, Ayadema, Kereko, all of these people, all of them, literally dictators. But we worked on the fact that, and this is a problem Nigeria has still not resolved, the relationship between feudalism and the claims of democracy. Because we are unable to resolve this. In Europe and in America, democracies had to literally demolish feudal institutions before you could erect. But now we are in Nigeria, and we are in state assemblies, we are everywhere. Everybody is you have to be a chief, you have to be a title person. So and usually what I do now is if I meet people in Nigeria, I just bend down. Hello, chief, how are you? Because you have to assume the person is a chief. Because if he will not tell you he's not a chief, but he will at least you have solved the problem. But a society which is making claims to certain levels of equality, we can ask the question, what is the difference between democracy in Africa and democracy in Asia? There are differences. For example, if you look at the life of somebody like Lee Kuan Yew, it's very interesting because we all admire Lee Kuan Yew. He's a fantastic man. But look at, Lee Kuan Yew came to power in 1959. That's when he became Prime Minister of Singapore. And he didn't step down until 1990. So that is 31 years of conducting elections and winning elections. All right? And even when he became, when he had to step down, he didn't go away. He made himself what you call senior minister. So he put somebody, and part of the reason was that his son, whom he was training to be prime minister, was not ready. So he put somebody there, and then he called himself senior minister. And he stayed as senior minister for 14 years. There was a minister there, but he was literally. And then when later on, he brought another person, and then he still called himself mentor minister. Okay? And he was mentor minister from 2004 to 2011, when he probably could no longer work. Now, all of us admire him, but that means that he was president of his country for, literally he supervised the affairs of his country for 50 years, 52 years. The point to make is, and this is where President Obasanjo's point is important, it's not so much what do we make out of the goals of human rights, justice, fairness, equity. What do we make of them when we come to pursue them in Africa? This is the question. And of course, there has been a huge debate as to what kind of democracy really works for us. For them in Singapore, the law they had was that Lee Kuan Yew went to Cambridge. He and his wife, they both went to Cambridge and came back with first class. And he raised the bar. Lee Kuan Yew decided that the only people who could work in the public service in Singapore has to be the equivalent of the Nigerians who are heading to NNPC. If you got a first class, you went to public service in Singapore. Because he understood very well that the wheelbarrow or the escalator carrying the good intentions of government has to be of a certain quality. And this is a mistake that many of us make. We think that we abuse a president. Maybe we should abuse them. But we abuse a governor. And we are saying that, you know, the problem with this, the president is not doing this, governor is not doing this. The first time I got a shock of this was when I went to visit President Shagari after he came out of prison. I sat down with him for about 3-4 hours. And he started telling me things that I had never imagined. Because he said, if you see the things, the bills that I tried to sponsor, but the National Assembly said, no way. So, if you do not have a bureaucracy, which is what carries your will to the people, then what you'll have is that there is a disconnection between the amount of money voted and the amount of work that is done. So Lee Kuan Yew understood this. And he made sure that his public servants in Singapore were earning far more money than any civil servant anywhere in the world. Okay, so the civil service became an attractive place. Comparing with our situation in Nigeria, somebody wants to marry your daughter now, and the man appears. He says, "My name is so and so. I work in MAMSA. I work in National Orientation Agency." You look at the man, National Orientation. Okay, it's no longer about. So the guy has gone away. Then another person comes and says, "Maybe your daughter doesn't really like the man." The man said, "You know, my father is a senator, Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's better for your daughter to marry senator than to go and marry civil servant." So the question, therefore, is that the inability of our system to deliver on the principles of democracy is not out of bad will. It is largely because we've not dealt with the whole question of who are delivering on the services. I'd like to try and end because I still have a few things, but let me try and see if I can end. The question then is, how do we measure the benefits of democracy? We all understand that at the end of it all, democracy hangs on principles such as, for example, democracy promises cultural and religious freedom. That's why the First Amendment of the American Constitution, First Amendment, was to insert the freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of the press. You cannot hope to be in a democracy if the media does not have the opportunity to do its job. Okay? The second point is, the essence of democracy is the defense of human rights, anchored on the principles of equity and fairness. Now, Justice Oputa, again, he was my father. I learned so much from him. I've been lucky, a very lucky Nigerian. I've worked with 3 justices of the Supreme Court: Justice Oputa, Justice Uwais, Justice Nikki Toby, and thanks to President Obasanjo in many respects. But he used to tell us a joke. He said somebody went to London, and then the man got to London. He was saying, "I want to go to the place." He saw a cleaner. He said, "I want to go to the High Court of Justice. Where is the way?" The man said, "Look, go all the way. Just keep going. You turn right, turn left, then you see the High Courts there. But whether they deliver justice, I don't know. But you will find the High Courts there." Now, we worry, and I hear Nigerians every day we are convinced that what is wrong with our country is that we have a justice system that is not working. I feel sorry for the people who are judges. I really do. Because during these elections, even me, small me, metaphorically and practically, I'm not a big man, small me, I have people calling me, talk to so and so, talk to so. If you are a judge in Nigeria, there was a case of a friend of mine who was a governor, and he was in the tribunal. And we were sitting down somewhere. They said they want to come, and somebody wants to see me. So I went to see the man. He said, "This governor is your friend. We have a tribunal. He has a tribunal case. And my wife is the chairman of the tribunal. He has not even looked for me. Hasn't come to see me." That is, and the poor woman is sitting there trying to do right. Her husband's people are on her neck. Her classmates are on her neck. Everybody who went to the same university is on her neck. Priests are on her neck, imams are on her neck, emirs are on her neck, to deliver what? To deliver justice. The only election that is fraudulent in Nigeria, in our calculation, is the one that my man didn't win. But the one that my man won, will find all the reasons in the world to justify it. I agree that there is urgent need for us to clean up the system. But look at what has happened in other places. There's a man that, many of you remember Thurgood Marshall. So many of you remember him, Justice of the Supreme Court of America. Now, Thurgood Marshall was a fantastic judge. And he was one of those who struggled for human rights for black people. Now, they wanted to get him into the Supreme Court because this is where political will is important and the methods by which we recruit people into public life. Because there was this man, well, my notes are all mixed up now. Please excuse me. This is what happens from not having a special assistant. I do. President Obasanjo is volunteering, but I'm not stupid. Because whatever I give to him, I won't get back. So I'm trying to find something. I'm so sorry. Please give me a second. Now, yes. So, you know, a president, a governor, there are signals that people in authority must send out. When George Bush decided to appoint Colin Powell as the president, as the chairman, joint chief of staff, he was sending out a message. It was the first black man. The first black man. But that also gave a sign of where he was going and where he was placing black people. You have to follow that trajectory before you come to Condoleezza Rice, before you come to other people and then come to Obama. See, as I'm standing here now, I come from Southern Kaduna, and my brother, General Musa, his appointment, women stop pounding in Southern Kaduna. They will have to stop. President Obasanjo is here. One day he went to, I'm sure he remembers, when General Agwe left the army, so he organized a Thanksgiving. President Obasanjo went. And then as I was driving in, he was going out. So I didn't say anything to him. Later on, I called him because he was going to my village to condole the wife of a former minister, my best friend. So when I called him later on at night, I said, sir, I saw you. He said, yes, okay. I said, I really want to thank you. He said, thank me for what? I said, no, you know, thank you for General Agwe. And thank you for appointing General Kukah. Both of them are from Southern Kaduna. And President Obasanjo just said to me, what are you thanking me for? You can't hear me? Okay, let me tell you a joke that I told last week. You know, one pastor, you know, only we in the Catholic Church, when people want to get married, it takes them about 6 months of preparation. We send out bands wherever they have been. So there was this, but in the Protestant churches, I don't know whether, but what they do is they wait until the day of the wedding. Then the bride and the groom will stand, and the pastor will say, look, these two people want to get married. If anybody in this congregation knows why they cannot get married, please come forward and tell us. So, but in this particular case, two people were standing, the bride, everybody all dressed up. So they were, if anybody knows why James and Teresa cannot get married, please step forward and tell us. If not, forever keep quiet. So everybody, of course, nobody always gets up. Because people are already prepared for enjoyment. Well, even if you know something, you keep your mouth shut. But all of a sudden, they turn in the church and saw one woman, heavily pregnant, carrying a child and pulling another child. She was walking towards the pastor. So everybody began to panic. The bride saw this woman coming. She decided to start running from it and crying. So the woman walked all the way to the pastor. So the pastor gave her a microphone. He said, those of us at the back there, we can't hear you. I'm sorry, so please let me. I'm sorry, let me come back to what I was saying. Thank you. But a president or a governor must make certain choices and send out signal about where they're going. But if you may be wondering, they just announced a new university in Southern Kaduna. If you're wondering, what are you laughing about? What are you excited about? Oga, we will be excited. Because in the history, since Kaduna State was created in 1986, the only side of industry that we saw in Kaduna was under Balarabe Musa, who started building a ginger factory in a place called Kachia. And then, as you know, he was impeached. He didn't finish the ginger factory and he was impeached. From the time of Balarabe Musa till today, the ginger factory, they have not added one block. Where he died, and that is the sign of industrial presence in the whole of Southern Kaduna by both federal and state government. Okay? So when you hear us rejoicing, this is the first time somebody asked, we on our day for class, yes, we come. In 1962, President Roosevelt, there was something dramatic that happened. There was this president who wanted, in the Supreme Court of America, he wanted Thurgood Marshall, a black man, to enter the Supreme Court. For a black man to enter the Supreme Court for the first time. And he didn't know what to do. So what he did was, he went to his friend, Justice Clark. Justice Clark, he was a justice of the Supreme Court. And he had helped him to campaign. So what he did was, he now went and promoted the son of Justice Ramsey to the position of Attorney General. After he made him Attorney General, Ramsey now realized that it would be foolish for him to remain in the Supreme Court while his son is Attorney General. So he decided to tender his resignation, which is what the president wanted. And because in the American Supreme Court, you stay until you die, or you say you don't want again. Even if you are on a wheelchair, you still remain, because it's for life. And it was when Justice Ramsey came out of the Supreme Court that Thurgood Marshall got a place. The point I'm making is that democracy is about equity, is about justice. We all want the same things. And I want to end by asking, how do we know that a country is democratizing? We can know by the quality of, even a blind man can tell when it is raining. We don't need to preach about democracy. The question people should ask is, why should we allow our people to be nostalgic about the military or about colonial rule? Because there are times Nigerians have said openly, we wish white people will come back, we wish the military will come back, we wish this person will come back. The question therefore is whether we measure our democracy by the kind of things we want for ourselves. There was something I was going to say, and I will just read it out. Osita, thank you very much. I know I'm not likely to miss my flight because President Obasanjo has promised to give me a ride. There is a writer, name is Khalil Gibran. Some of you know about him. I quote what he said. He said, "Pity the nation that is full of beliefs but empty of religion. Pity the nation that wears a cloth it does not weave and eats the bread it does not harvest. Pity the nation that claims the bully as a hero. Pity the nation whose sages are dumb with years and whose strong men and women are still in the cradle. Pity the nation divided into fragments, with each fragment deeming itself a nation." Finally, there are 5 books that I would have highlighted, but it's not necessary. Because if you ask the average Nigerian politician, what book are you reading now? Okay? Maybe people are busy with matters of budget and appropriation. But you cannot be a president, you cannot govern this country without constantly engaging in mental reflection about what is happening elsewhere. So I recommend 5 books, if you are able to. One is Michael Pillsbury. And it's a fantastic book. The title of the book is The 100-Year Marathon. China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. It's a fantastic book. But it talks about what we are seeing in China now. They started planning 100 years ago. Nigerian politicians must therefore understand that delivering on these services takes a while. The second is great power inside the political mind, the human side of politics and how it shapes development. And then one of my favorite, Moses Naim, The End of Power. Why being in charge is not what it used to be. And then a second book by him, The Revenge of Power, How Autocrats Are Reinventing Politics in the 21st Century. And by Yashak Monk, The People versus Democracy, Why Freedom is in Danger and How to Save It. And Levitsky and Ziblatt, many of you know this, How Democracies Die, What History Reveals About Our Future, and so on. I want to end. In summary, the democratization of development. The democratization of development leads to the development of democracy. That is, if you decide to equitably democratize development and not take every institution, university, medical school, whatever, to your village, and if all the roads don't lead to your village, if you appreciate the fact that the poor people living on the hills, the poor people living across the river, they too didn't come to accompany you. So if we are honest enough to democratize development, we will be able to develop democracy. Thank you very much for your patience.